Welcome to the first of our discussion in the series of the letter of James. Last weekend, as with the introductory sermon, the theme was not only listening to but doing, being hearers and doers of God's word. I want to make one thing clear. James' letter, as I mentioned last weekend, is not about works being more important than faith. It's not about one being opposed to the other. What we see in the letter of James very clearly is the importance of salvation in Jesus Christ. But James is actually emphasising that the living out of that faith is vital. Our relationship with God is about us being transformed. And so we see in the beginning of this letter that James writes that he draws out the importance of allowing God to change, to transform our life, and then for us to respond appropriately to what God is prompting us about. If I can put it as an example in this way. If I were to make a phone call to my bank, and I listen to what it is that they have got to say to me, I want to action well, I want to respond appropriately. And so I need to listen to what their instructions are.
Or internet access number, or 9-digit account number now.
And they're asking for something, and I can respond, or simply just keep listening.
For a Virgin credit card, check the status of your application.
But if I only just keep listening, I can soak up all the information, I can take lots of copious notes,
Speak with a member of our customer care team.
but I'm actually not going to get anything out of the experience.
We are sorry, we did not get any response. Please enter your 16-digit credit
And
card.
so they'll keep
or
asking
internet
me
access
to respond
number,
appropriately,
or 9-digit account number
but
now.
until I actually respond,
To report a lost
it is
or stolen
simply
card,
information that's going into
one.
my head,
your
and
phone
nothing
for a Virgin
comes
credit card.
of that activity. That's similar to what James is actually encouraging the Christian church as he writes this letter. Don't simply be hearers of God's word. Don't be listeners only to what God is saying, but action it. Respond appropriately. Now listen to what James writes at the beginning of the letter. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance, and perseverance must finish the work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. And if anyone lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault. God desires to grow us to maturity. But God's work in us is a tapestry. It never looks clear to us necessarily from our perspective. But from God's perspective, He has begun the transforming work in our life as we come to faith in Jesus Christ, as we trust Him with our lives and we surrender to Him. He begins that transforming work, but He wants to continue a transforming work as we read His Word, as we study it, and then as we apply it in our lives, as we respond appropriately. Last weekend, as we listened to the sermon, the focus was very much on don't only be hearers but doers. In our study today, as a life group, as you share with one another and pray with one another, my prayer will be that you will go deep into God's Word, that you will explore what it means for you to be transformed and what it means for you to respond appropriately as God calls you to be a radical disciple of Jesus Christ.